In this video, I'm going to show you how to blend marker pens. One of the difficult things I find with using marker pens is that they don't blend together very well. However, you may not realise this, but you can actually produce a certain level of painting with marker pens. I'm going to show you how. First of all, you will need paper, marker pens, water, a paintbrush and a piece of tissue. Once you have all of those items, you will need to make sure, and this is very important, that the water does not touch the nib of the marker pens, or this will ruin them. You can do all of your dry work first with the pens, and then the water and the paintbrush, they come into it last. So, to begin with, I'm going to try some blends with warm colours and with cool colours. I'm not going to combine these together yet. I'm going to just use the warm colours and the cool colours. You may remember from previous learning that the warm colours are colours associated with things that are hot. So we have here primary red, primary yellow and secondary orange. Red and yellow are actually mixed together to create orange. Over here we have primary colours, which are the blue, and then we have secondary colours, which are purple and green. Blue is used in the creation of these two colours, but in order to create purple, you may already know, we have to use red, and in order to create green, we have to use blue and yellow. These colours all combined together do not create cool and warm colours. They are a mixture of those together. We need to separate them in order to have our cool and our warm colours together. So here is what they look like separated. We're going to start off with, as we always do in art, the lightest colour in our colour selection. That's very easy when we're talking about yellow, orange and red. Not so easy when we're talking about these darker colours here. So you will need to decide what, depending on what tones of the colours you have, which is your lightest colour order. We will come to these in a moment. You are going to create a blend just using a tonal bar. You may have seen from previous videos, a tonal bar can easily be created just by simply drawing a rectangular shape on your page somewhere. We are going to have yellow to begin with. We are then going to fade into orange and then last of all into red. You do not need to draw a line through your tonal bar, but you can draw a marker point like I have done here if it will help you. Some students won't need this. I'm going to begin by adding a layer of yellow. I'm going to make sure that I shade in the direction lengthways across my tonal bar. I'm not pressing very hard. I'm only putting on one layer of felt pen or marker pen, but I am making sure I'm crossing over into where I'm going to start my orange. This will be important for my blend. I'll go to my next darkest colour, which is orange. I am going to try not to overlap too much with these colours. You might already know and have experienced yourself with marker pens that if you draw over the top of different markers, it doesn't work out very well. It can actually ruin the colour on the end of your markers, particularly if yellow. If you've ever drawn over blue with a yellow marker, you'll notice it ruins the nib. So we're not really going to draw over the top of the yellow, just a few dashes is fine. And then red, again the same thing. I'm going to put a layer of red down, and then just where I want them to meet in between here, I'm just going to put a few dashes. I'm not really colouring over the top of the orange, but I am going to try and put a few dashes just to encourage that they merge together. Okay, doesn't look like anything just yet. This is not what marker pens are designed for, but because many marker pens are water soluble, that means that the colours break down or the materials break down when water is added to them. So using a nice clean paintbrush and some nice clean water, I would like you give your paintbrush a good rinse and then make sure it's not sopping wet, so you can see if it's dripping, you need to remove the excess water. The easiest way to do this is just to remove the excess water by knocking it on the side of your jar. If you can't do it that way, you can also take the water off just by gently pinching it at the ends. We want a damp paintbrush, so it has water on it, but it's not dripping with water. Once you have a damp paintbrush, you can then start to blend very gently in one direction, popping your wet, damp paintbrush over the top of your marker pen. And hopefully you can see on this from the video, what is happening here is that the pen is breaking down the colours and they're starting to merge together. Give your paintbrush a good rinse, remove the excess like I showed you, or even with your finger, because you want it to be damp, not wet. We don't want wet. And then you can very gently and also lightly just merge this line of watermark here to help that to disappear, so that you're starting to get this painterly effect. Keep working along your tonal bar. Remember, remove the excess. You can pinch the excess water off, or you can get it off on the side, but this brush is virtually dry. It's not that wet, it's just damp. Try to perform a brush stroke. Okay, so a brush stroke is when your brush hits the paper, drags along and lifts off the paper. Okay, so a slowed down brush stroke looks like you popping the paintbrush down, dragging it along and lifting it up. What we don't want to do is start going backwards and forwards with our brush touching the paper all the time while it is wet. And for those of you who've ever done this, you will know the reason for that is because the water and the paper and the friction of those two things rubbing together will start to make the paper disintegrate, and we don't want that today. Keep your brush clean at all times. If you're struggling to get it dry by pinching it off or knocking off the excess, don't forget you can always use your paper that you've got, like kitchen roll or toilet roll works really well for this. If you want to check whether your brush is clean, you can even use the kitchen roll or toilet roll, and that will show you whether or not you've got ink on there. Now I'm going to finish off with the red, and I'm just performing a brush stroke. So I'm not going backwards and forwards really quickly on my paper because that will break it. I'm just popping my brush down, dragging it across and then bringing it back up again really nice and gently. And without too much time at all, you can see that those colours are starting to blend into each other really nicely to create like a painted effect. I can tell I've got ink on my brush if I use my piece of paper for a test. So I want to get rid of that. And you will now need to leave that to dry. Please don't be tempted to add in any extra colour while this is wet. Think of this as a sponge. If you add any water to this nib whilst it's wet here or wet from here or wet from your paintbrush, it will ruin your markers. We don't want that today. So once the water touches your page, that's it. You can't do any more marker colouring in until this is completely dry. But the good news is once this section is completely dry, you can then start to work in over the top. The process is exactly the same for the cool colours. And if I show you just here, I'll do a very quick demonstration. Imagine that I'm going to go with purple because I think that's the next darkest. Imagine that I have created my lovely hot and cool colour design or my image that I'm creating. I've popped my marker into the sections that I want it to appear in. The next thing I'm going to do when I've finished my artwork is I'm going to convert my markers so they look a little bit more like paints. I need to get my damp paintbrush. I need to make sure it's really not wet, so I can even use a bit of paper just to remove the excess water. And then very gently, I am going to work in over the top of my markers and just try to encourage that they blend into each other. Remember what I said about dark colours are a little bit tougher to blend into each other. Markers aren't really designed to do this, they just happen to do this. So I'm finished with that section now. I'm going to remove the excess water and I'm going to blend over the top of this marker. I'm just going to bring a little bit of the dark over to this side, just very, very gently try to merge this line here where the purple meets the blue so it fades in a little bit better. Now you might be able to see on the video this section here is starting to look like it's disintegrating a little bit. If you get anything that looks like little grains of sand appear on your work, stop, because that means that the paper's actually starting to disintegrate from underneath. It doesn't take very long at all. You can see that I've achieved this painterly effect very quickly. The explanation's taken longer than it takes to actually do the painting. So please don't think that when you're painting that this is going to take you a really long time to achieve this effect. Actually, once you've got your markers down on your artwork, this part takes not very long at all. You've just got to be really careful that you aren't tempted to overwork your painting, your marker pen. And then, of course, remember, don't do any colouring over the top while it is wet. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found out something new about your marker pens that you have in your own home. Please make sure that when you're doing this task, that if you've got water out, that you haven't got anything electrical nearby you. And if you have got good quality drawing paper, this works well with that. If not, just be very careful about the amount of water that you have on your brush going onto your page. I can't wait to see what you design. Don't forget to upload a photo of your work and tag the visual arts folder.